But after a series of controversies and serious allegations, he has effectively been banished.
One DNA test absolutely shattered Princess Beatrice's world. What she discovered will leave you speechless. For 36 years, she believed Prince Andrew was her father. Then the envelope arrived. 0% match. The palace had been hiding a devastating secret for decades. But when she finally met her real father and saw her own eyes staring back, everything exploded.
Now more than ever, when I think about some of the incredible challenges that we have to face.
The cover-up involved the Queen herself, millions in hush money, and a scandal so massive it nearly destroyed the monarchy. The genetic test had been routine, nothing more than a standard health screening. Palace physicians had recommended it as a precautionary measure, concerned about hereditary conditions that might run in the family. Beatrice had provided her DNA sample without any hesitation, never imagining that modern science would unravel the carefully constructed story of her life. When the results came back, they were devastating. The report stated in clinical terms that the probability of paternity was 0%. The man she had always called father, Prince Andrew, was not her biological parent. What makes this story even more complex is that the truth had been hiding in plain sight for decades. Long before Beatrice opened that envelope, there had been whispers circulating through the palace. Former staff members, now retired and freed from their obligations of silence, have shared what they remember from the 1980s. According to these accounts, the marriage between Beatrice's mother Sarah and Prince Andrew was never built on love. It was an arrangement, the kind that royal families have relied on for generations to strengthen political alliances and ensure the continuation of bloodlines. Margaret Thornwood, who worked at the palace during that period and is now 78 years old, has spoken about what she witnessed. She recalls hearing raised voices echoing through the hallways late at night, doors slamming, and long stretches of uncomfortable silence that felt heavier than any argument. The staff were trained not to notice these things, but human nature made that impossible. They saw everything, even if they were expected to say nothing. By the time Sarah became pregnant with Beatrice, the relationship between her and Andrew had deteriorated significantly. To the outside world, they appeared to be the perfect royal couple. Photographs showed them smiling at official events, walking side by side at ceremonies, performing their duties with grace. Behind closed doors, however, the reality was very different. The marriage had become little more than a carefully choreographed performance, convincing to audiences but hollow for those living it. Palace records from that era, which have since been examined with fresh scrutiny, reveal patterns that should have raised questions at the time. There were extended trips that Sarah took alone to countryside estates. There were meetings that somehow never made it into official diaries. Most tellingly, there was a particular gentleman who appeared frequently in informal photographs, though he was always carefully removed from any images released to the public. This man was James Thornton Hayes. Hayes was what people might call a fixture in royal circles during the early 1980s. He was charming, well-educated, and moved through high society with the kind of ease that suggested he belonged there, even though he technically did not. He attended palace gatherings regularly and was considered a close family friend. What very few people realized was that his connection to Sarah went far deeper than casual acquaintance. Their relationship, while discreet, was significant enough to result in a pregnancy that would be kept secret for more than 3 decades. When palace officials first began to suspect the truth about Beatrice's paternity, they responded with remarkable efficiency. This was not a matter of malice or cruelty. Instead, it was driven by institutional fear. The idea of acknowledging such a scandal was simply unthinkable. They believed it could potentially destabilize the entire monarchy. Sir Anthony Weatherby, who served as the Queen's private secretary during that period, took charge of the concealment effort with meticulous attention to detail. Documents that might have revealed inconsistencies in the timeline of Sarah's pregnancy were quietly moved to archives so obscure they might as well have been lost forever. Photographs were edited using the limited technology available at the time. This meant physically removing figures from images or carefully cropping them out. Staff members who had witnessed too much found themselves being transferred to distant royal properties, far from the center of power. Others were offered early retirement packages that were too generous to refuse. According to a former palace accountant who has spoken anonymously, the amount of money spent on maintaining this silence was staggering. It could have funded a small hospital, they said. Cash payments changed hands. Non-disclosure agreements were signed, backed by threats of legal action so severe that no one dared to break them. The palace essentially built what this person described as a fortress of lies, constructed brick by expensive brick. However, money was not the most effective tool in the cover-up. The real power came from narrative control. The palace's public relations operation worked with masterful skill, flooding newspapers with stories about domestic happiness. Articles described Andrew doting on his infant daughter. Features showed Sarah glowing with maternal joy. Every staged photograph reinforced the official story until it became impossible to separate from reality. The repetition made the lie feel like the truth. Meanwhile, James Thornton Hayes quietly disappeared from royal circles. He accepted a diplomatic position abroad, which appeared to be a promotion, but was actually a convenient form of exile. For years, he lived in silence, bound by legal agreements that threatened financial destruction if he ever spoke publicly about what had happened. He carried the secret of Beatrice's paternity alone, and according to later accounts, the weight of it grew heavier with each passing year. The relationship between Sarah and James had not been a sordid affair in the traditional sense. According to those familiar with the situation, it was more accurately described as a genuine connection between two people who felt trapped by their circumstances. Both were drowning in duty and expectation. They found brief solace in each other during a particularly difficult period. When Sarah discovered she was pregnant, the timing made it plausible that Andrew could be the father. The palace seized on that plausibility and transformed it into absolute certainty through sheer force of will and institutional power. For 36 years, this carefully constructed version of reality held firm. Beatrice grew up believing she was exactly who everyone told her she was. She walked through gilded palace corridors, surrounded by portraits of ancestors, never questioning whether she truly belonged to that lineage. Every aspect of her identity was built on what she thought was solid ground. The idea that it could all be false simply never occurred to her. Why would it? She had no reason to doubt the story she had been told since birth. The palace's deception was so thorough, so complete, that even routine medical testing seemed perfectly safe. No one anticipated that advances in genetic science would become the instrument that finally brought the truth to light. When Beatrice provided that DNA sample for health screening purposes, she was simply following medical advice. She had no idea she was about to discover that her entire life had been based on a lie that dozens of people had worked together to maintain. When Beatrice first read the genetic test results, she went through them 3 times before the reality truly sank in. Each reading felt like a fresh wound, the clinical language cutting deeper as its meaning became clearer. The phrase "not the biological father" kept repeating in her mind. This was the man who had taught her to ride horses as a child. He had attended every school performance, sitting in the audience and applauding her efforts. He had walked beside her through the palace gardens, patiently explaining concepts of duty and tradition that she would need to understand as a member of the royal family. And now she was being told that this man shared no blood connection with her whatsoever. She collapsed onto the velvet furniture in her private chambers, and the ornate surroundings suddenly felt artificial, like props on an elaborate stage set. Her body shook with sobs as 36 years of memories underwent a violent transformation in her mind. Every moment with Andrew now carried a new question attached to it. Had he known the truth all along? Had he looked at her throughout her childhood with the secret knowledge that she was not actually his daughter? Every embrace, every piece of advice, every expression of pride were these genuine feelings or carefully rehearsed performances, as polished as any royal ceremony. The questions multiplied rapidly in her mind, each one opening up new uncertainties. Who else had been aware of the deception? Her mother Sarah had obviously known, but what about others? Had her grandmother, the Queen herself, been part of the conspiracy of silence? What about her siblings? The thought that she might have spent her entire life as the only person ignorant of her own true story was almost unbearable. She felt humiliated, betrayed, and completely alone. Her lady-in-waiting, a woman named Alexandra, found her several hours later, still clutching the crumpled test results. Mascara had streaked down her cheeks, leaving dark trails across her face. Alexandra spoke gently, though her eyes revealed that she too had been shocked by the news. She had clearly been briefed by someone before entering the room. "Your Highness," she said carefully, "the family is requesting your presence for a meeting." Beatrice looked up at her and asked a question that contained all her pain and confusion. "Which family?" she said, her voice hoarse from crying. The one that raised me or the one I apparently belonged to? The meeting took place in a room known as the Oak Room, a private chamber where the family gathered when discussions were too sensitive for any outside ears. When Beatrice entered, she found them assembled in a way that felt almost like a tribunal preparing to pass judgment. Her mother Sarah sat pale and trembling, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Andrew stood with his face appearing as if it had been carved from stone, showing no emotion. Her grandmother, the Queen, maintained the regal composure she was famous for, even under these extraordinary circumstances. There were also several senior advisors present, and their attendance felt like an intrusion into what should have been a private family matter. Beatrice did not wait for anyone else to speak first. Her voice cut through the heavy silence like a knife through fabric. "How long have you known?" she demanded. Each word was sharp and precise, carrying all the anger and hurt she felt. Sarah's lips trembled as she tried to form a response. "Darling, please," she began, but Beatrice cut her off. "How long?" she repeated, needing a direct answer. Sarah's whisper was barely audible. "Since before you were born." The admission hit Beatrice like a physical blow. She turned to look at Andrew, searching his face for something that would help her understand. She wanted to see anger, relief, anything that would give her insight into what he was feeling. "You knew," she said to him, her voice rising. "You knew from the beginning, and you let me believe a lie my entire life." Andrew's response came with obvious emotion, thickening his voice. "You are my daughter in every way that matters," he said. "Blood does not define what makes someone family." "But it does," Beatrice shouted back, her voice echoing off the wooden panels that lined the walls. "It does matter when my entire identity, my place in this family, my claim to any kind of royal standing, all of it is built on deception. It matters when every single one of you decided that protecting your precious institution was more important than my right to know who I actually am." The force of her words seemed to shake the room. The Queen had remained silent up to this point, but now she spoke with the authority of someone who had spent a lifetime being obeyed. "Beatrice," she said firmly, "you must understand the position we were in. The stability of the monarchy was at stake." But Beatrice was beyond caring about institutional concerns. "I do not care about the monarchy," she said. The words hung in the air, sounding almost heretical in that setting. "What I care about is that every single person in this room chose to deceive me for decades. I care that my entire life has been a fiction that all of you agreed to maintain." What followed was an argument unlike anything that room had likely ever witnessed. Voices rose to levels that royals were specifically trained never to reach. Accusations flew back and forth. Sarah began weeping openly as she tried to explain the impossible situation she had found herself in all those years ago. She described being trapped in a loveless marriage, finding brief happiness with James, and then discovering she was pregnant. The choice she faced had felt like no choice at all. How could she admit the truth and risk destroying everything? Andrew defended the decision with cold pragmatism that made Beatrice's blood boil. "Exposing the truth would have destroyed everything we have built," he argued. "The scandal alone could have brought down the entire monarchy. We did what had to be done to protect the institution." "You did what was convenient," Beatrice shot back. "You protected yourselves and your positions. You left me to live a lie because it was easier for all of you." It was her grandmother's words that cut the deepest. "We protected you, Beatrice," the Queen said with complete conviction. "We gave you a life of privilege, security, and purpose. Do you honestly think James Thornton Hayes could have offered you any of that?" The question revealed everything about how the palace viewed the situation. They genuinely believed they had done Beatrice a favor by concealing her true paternity. In their minds, a royal life built on deception was far superior to an honest life lived in relative obscurity. Beatrice stood there looking at these people who were supposed to love her, and she realized that they had prioritized the institution above her well-being at every turn. They had made calculations about what was best for the monarchy, and convinced themselves that these calculations were also what was best for her. They had never given her a choice. They had simply decided her fate and expected her to be grateful for it once she found out. Finally, after what felt like hours of argument, Beatrice made a statement that she knew would change everything. "I want to meet him," she said, her voice now hollow and drained of emotion. "I want to meet my father, my real father." The room fell completely silent. Everyone understood that this was the one demand they had hoped she would never make. Meeting James Thornton Hayes would make the situation undeniably real in a way that could not be managed or controlled. It would be an acknowledgement that the official story had been false all along. The advisors exchanged nervous glances. Sarah looked down at her hands. Andrew's jaw tightened. The Queen studied her granddaughter with an expression that was difficult to read. But Beatrice did not waver. She had spent her entire life being told what to do, how to behave, what to believe about herself. This was one decision that she was going to make on her own terms, regardless of what anyone else thought. She was going to meet the man whose genetic material had created her, whether the palace approved or not. For the first time in her life, she was going to seek truth rather than accepting the comfortable fiction that had been carefully constructed around her. The meeting with James Thornton Hayes was arranged with all the secrecy of a covert intelligence operation. After decades living abroad, James had quietly returned to Britain and was now living in Scotland, far from the scrutiny of London society. At 68 years old, he carried himself with a noticeable stoop, as if the weight of his long-held secret had become a physical burden pressing down on his shoulders. The location chosen for their first meeting was a private estate situated well away from the capital, far from cameras and the prying eyes of journalists who would have paid fortunes for a single photograph. Beatrice arrived first, her heart pounding so hard against fear, her ribs that she thought it might be visible through her clothing. When James entered the room, she experienced something that took her breath away. She was looking at her own eyes staring back at her. They shared the same unusual shade of green, the same distinctive pattern of gold flecks scattered through the iris. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected not her current self, but her genetic inheritance made visible. James stood awkwardly near the door, clearly uncertain about how to proceed. "I have thought about this moment for 36 years, he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of all that lost time. I have imagined countless times what I would say to you, how I might explain everything. But now that you are actually here in front of me, I find that I have no words adequate to the situation we are in." The first question that came out of Beatrice's mouth emerged before she could stop herself. "Why did you not fight for me?" she asked. The question contained all, her confusion about how a father could simply walk away from his child. James's face seemed to crumble at her words. "Because they gave me a choice that was not truly a choice at all," he explained. "The palace officials told me that if I remained silent and disappeared from your life, you would have everything. A title, security, a sense of purpose, a place in one of the most important families in the world. But if I challenged them, if I tried to claim you as my daughter, we would both lose. You would be branded as illegitimate, stripped of your place in the royal family, and I would be destroyed financially and socially. What kind of father would I be to subject a child to that kind of life?" "So, you chose nothing over something," Beatrice said, though she could feel her anger beginning to ebb away, replaced by a profound sadness. James shook his head slowly. "I chose what I believed would give you the best life," he replied. "Whether I was right or wrong in making that choice is something I have questioned every single day since. But Beatrice," he said, and his voice cracked with emotion, "I have loved you from the moment I knew you existed. Every photograph of you that I could find, I collected and kept. Every article written about your charitable work, your public appearances, anything mentioning you, I saved them all. I have been your father from a distance, and it has been simultaneously the greatest pain and the greatest privilege of my life." They talked for hours that day, slowly unraveling the story piece by piece. James explained the nature of his relationship with Sarah, describing how they had found solace in each other during a period when both felt suffocated by the weight of expectations. It had not been a torrid affair driven by passion and recklessness. Rather, it was a brief but genuine connection between two people who were drowning in duty and desperately needed someone who understood. When Sarah discovered she was pregnant, the timing made it plausible that Andrew could be the father. The palace had seized on that plausibility and transformed it into ironclad certainty through institutional willpower. Beatrice asked him if he had ever wanted to tell her the truth. Every single day, James admitted without hesitation. "But I had signed legal agreements and made promises that carried severe consequences if broken. More than that, though, I watched you from afar as you grew into an extraordinary woman. You seemed happy and purposeful in your role. I told myself that perhaps their way had been the right one after all, that maybe you were better off not knowing the truth. I deserved the truth, Beatrice said softly but firmly. Yes, James agreed, his eyes filling with tears. You absolutely did, and I will regret my silence for the rest of my life. Despite the palace's most determined efforts to keep the situation contained, the story leaked to the media. A junior staff member, disgusted by the decades of institutional deception they had, provided documents to an investigative journalist. Within 48 hours, the revelation had exploded across every major media outlet around the world. The headlines were brutal and unrelenting. Publications ran stories with titles about royal bloodline scandals, DNA revelations, and palace deceptions spanning decades. The coverage dominated news cycles for weeks, with each outlet trying to find a new angle or additional details that others had missed. However, something unexpected happened that no one at the palace had anticipated. Instead of turning against Beatrice and viewing her as somehow tainted or illegitimate, the public rallied to her defense with remarkable enthusiasm. She was not seen as the architect of this scandal, but rather as its primary victim. Here was a woman who had lived her entire life as an unwitting player in someone else's carefully scripted performance, never knowing that the fundamental facts of her identity were false. Social media platforms exploded with messages of support. Hashtags supporting Beatrice trended globally, reaching millions of people. Letters began pouring into the palace by the thousands, coming from ordinary people who wanted to share their own experiences. Many wrote about paternity surprises they had experienced. Others described family secrets that had upended their lives. The common thread was the devastating experience of discovering that your identity was not what you had always believed it to be. But the public support came with significant demands attached. People wanted accountability from the institution that had maintained such an elaborate deception for so long. How could the palace have kept this secret for decades? What other secrets might they be hiding? The scandal reignited long, simmering debates about whether the monarchy remained relevant in modern Britain and whether its claims to legitimacy could withstand serious scrutiny. Parliament convened special sessions to discuss the implications. Constitutional scholars appeared on television programs debating what this meant for royal succession. If Beatrice's paternity was in question, they argued, what did that mean for the legitimacy of the royal bloodline more broadly? The entire foundation of monarchical authority rested on the concept of hereditary bloodline. What happened when that bloodline was revealed to be more fiction than verifiable fact? Protests erupted outside Buckingham Palace, though notably most of the demonstrators were not calling for Beatrice to be stripped of her titles. Instead, the crowds demanded transparency and honesty from the institution. They wanted an end to the kind of institutional secrecy that had enabled such a massive deception to continue for over 3 decades. People carried signs calling for truth and accountability rather than attacking Beatrice personally. In the weeks following the public revelation, Beatrice faced an impossible decision that would define the trajectory of the rest of her life. The palace offered her what they considered a reasonable path forward. There would be public acknowledgement of the situation, but she could continue in her royal role. Andrew would remain her father in title and in practice, even if not in biological fact. The palace communications team would frame the story as an example of love transcending biology, of a family choosing each other despite difficult circumstances. The alternative was to walk away entirely. She could renounce her titles, publicly acknowledge James as her father, and build a completely new life outside the royal framework that had defined every aspect of her existence. Both options felt like betrayals of someone or something important. To stay meant accepting the legitimacy of the deception and becoming complicit in the institutional dishonesty that had shaped her entire life. To leave meant abandoning Andrew, who had raised her with genuine care, walking away from the family she loved despite everything they had done, and giving up the sense of purpose that royal duty had always provided her. Beatrice spent long nights walking alone through the palace gardens, wrestling with the impossible weight of her decision. The carefully manicured hedges and ancient trees had always brought her comfort, but now even these familiar surroundings felt different. Everything in her life had been recontextualized by the revelation, and she found herself questioning whether any of her feelings or experiences could be trusted. Her relationship with Andrew had become painfully complicated in ways she was still trying to understand. She still loved him and still valued the years he had spent raising her as his daughter. Those memories remained real even if the biological foundation beneath them had proven false. But she could not forget that he had chosen deception over truth, that he had prioritized the institution over honesty with her. James, for his part, made absolutely no demands on her. During one of their increasingly frequent meetings, he told her plainly that he had no expectations. "I do not expect anything from you," he said with genuine sincerity. "You do not owe me a relationship or public acknowledgement or anything else. Whatever you decide to do, I will support your choice completely. I have already had 36 years to come to terms with my role in all of this. You are the one who just discovered the truth. Take whatever time you need to process it and make the right decision for yourself." Just when it seemed the story had reached some kind of conclusion, palace archivists uncovered something that changed the situation once again. Deep within the royal archives, buried in genealogical records that few people ever had reason to examine, they found a connection that no one had anticipated. James Thornton Hayes, it turned out, was not merely a family friend with no connection to royalty. His ancestry could be traced back to a cadet branch of the royal family itself. The connection was distant enough that his family line had long since lost any claim to titles or position. But it was close enough that he genuinely shared royal blood through his lineage. The connection dated back 5 generations to a younger son who had married outside the aristocracy. His descendants had gradually drifted away from royal circles over the decades, becoming ordinary citizens who happened to carry royal DNA. The discovery was simultaneously vindicating and devastating for Beatrice. Her scandal was not a complete severing from the royal bloodline as everyone had assumed. Instead, it was a complicated reconnection to that bloodline through unexpected and circuitous paths. She did carry royal blood, just not through the straightforward father-to-daughter lineage that everyone had believed for 36 years. The palace, desperate for any kind of lifeline that might help manage the ongoing crisis, seized on this revelation immediately. Their communications team framed it as evidence that Beatrice had always belonged in the royal family. They suggested it was almost fate that royal blood had found its way back to the throne regardless of human mistakes and deceptions. Some commentators called it a silver lining that proved everything had worked out as it should have. But for Beatrice, the discovery brought no comfort whatsoever. It felt like yet another attempt to manage the narrative, to reshape an inconvenient and messy truth into something more palatable for public consumption. The palace was doing exactly what it had always done, prioritizing how things looked over how things actually were. She was exhausted by the endless spin and the institutional reflex to control every aspect of the story. In the end, Beatrice chose a third path that took everyone by surprise. She would remain a working member of the royal family, but only on her own terms. She demanded and ultimately received an unprecedented agreement from the palace. They would publicly acknowledge the full truth without any softening or management. Andrew's role as her father in love and practice, but not biology, would be clearly stated. James's biological paternity would be openly confirmed. Most importantly, the decades of institutional deception that had kept the secret buried would be acknowledged as wrong. Beyond this admission, Beatrice insisted on using her platform to advocate for causes she now felt passionate about. She wanted to push for truth in family relationships, to support children's rights to know their genetic origins, and to fight against the kind of institutional secrecy that had defined royal life for centuries. The palace agreed to these terms, recognizing that they had little choice if they wanted to keep her within the fold. Her first public appearance after the announcement was carefully chosen. She attended an event for a charity supporting children born through donor conception or those navigating complex family situations. The choice was deliberate, signaling her commitment to honoring truth over tradition. When she spoke to the assembled crowd, her voice was clear and strong. She no longer sounded like the uncertain woman who had sobbed over DNA results in her private chambers. "I stand before you as someone whose identity was rewritten without my knowledge or consent," she said to the audience. "But I also stand before you as someone who has learned that family is far more complicated than bloodlines suggest, that love is more real than any title, and that truth, however painful it might be in the moment, is always preferable to comfortable lies." Andrew attended the event despite the personal cost it represented for him. He sat in the audience watching his daughter, and those who were present reported seeing tears in his eyes. Their relationship would never be what it once was, that much was certain. Too much had happened, and too many lies had been told. but neither was their bond, completely destroyed. They were learning to navigate entirely new territory together, trying to build something authentic from the ruins of decades of deception. James remained largely out of the public eye, respecting Beatrice's need to control her own narrative and tell her own story. But the two of them met regularly in private, carefully building the father-daughter relationship that had been denied to them for so many years. It was awkward at times and emotionally difficult, but both were committed to creating something real between them. The monarchy itself was forever changed by the scandal. Another layer of mystique had been stripped away, forcing the ancient institution to confront its tendency towards secrecy and control. Some critics argued that this weakened the monarchy and made it less special. Others believed it actually strengthened the institution by making it more human, more honest, and more relevant to a modern world that increasingly valued authenticity over carefully managed public images. 2 years after the revelation first became public, Beatrice published a memoir that became an international bestseller. The book, which carried a title referencing truth and royal titles, offered her complete account of the experience. She wrote about the initial devastation of discovery, the anger she felt at the betrayal, and ultimately the liberation that came from living authentically. The book was praised for its honesty and emotional depth. In the memoir's final chapter, she reflected deeply on her journey. For years, she wrote, "I believed my identity was fixed and unchangeable, written in blood and centuries of tradition. The DNA results did not just reveal the identity of my biological father, they revealed that I had been living someone else's carefully constructed story." The most painful part was not learning about James. It was realizing that the people I trusted most in the world had chosen institutional preservation over my fundamental right to truth. But she also wrote about what she had learned through the ordeal. "We are not defined by the lies others tell about us," she concluded, "or even by the truths they hide from us. We are defined by how we respond when we finally see ourselves clearly. I am a daughter of James Thornton Hayes. I am also a daughter of Andrew, who raised me with genuine love despite extraordinarily complicated circumstances. I am a woman whose life was shaped by deception, but I refuse to be defined by it. The crown I wear feels different now. It is lighter perhaps, but more honestly earned. I wear it not because bloodline dictates that I must, but because I choose to serve. And that choice, made with full knowledge of who I truly am, means more than any inherited title ever could." The impact of Beatrice's revelation extended far beyond the palace walls, creating ripples that reached into unexpected corners of society. Within months of her story becoming public knowledge, genetic testing, companies reported significant increases in requests from adults seeking to verify their own paternity. Therapists who specialized in family trauma and identity issues found their waiting lists growing as people confronted long-buried suspicions about their origins. Beatrice had given permission to millions of people to ask questions they had been afraid to voice for years or even decades.